We want to thank everybody for also supporting us with dues and donations. We're very, very grateful for all of that. So first of all, we're going to introduce the board of directors and the officers. So Keith Barber here, president. Frank Gasson is behind me, and he is the senior vice president. Jerry Struzik is my left, and he is the treasurer. Where are you, Deanna?
I'm right here.
Deanna Carduz is our secretary. Rest of the board, Chris Beatty is a board member. Patty Danilecki is right over here, another board member. And Martha Hofer is behind here. She's the last of us Mohegans. Kate. This is also Martha's place. This is a PHIA building, and we thank them so much for letting us use it. So,
no, that's okay.
That's
okay. I'm
before we get started,
don't worry.
Before we get started, we want to acknowledge we've lost a number of our members over the last year. Certainly condolences to all those families. We do want to highlight some people. So one of the founders of this organization, probably one of the most influential founders after Frank, would be Christine McManus. So if you walk around here at all, you've seen, talked to, been told by Christine. When we got this thing started, when Frank got it started in August of 2019, the plan was we want to go to a select board meeting. We want to get them to understand that we're upset about our water and we want to fix it. So Christine gathered email addresses for a month. So we ended up with 140 people going to the select board meeting. We overwhelmed the building. The meeting was delayed because they couldn't figure out what to do with all of us. But the result of that was the following year, the town funded the comprehensive wastewater management plan, $660,000 to get that going, and it's still in process now. The chairperson of that group, Kathy Alfano, is right here in the front.
Okay.
So Christine was clearly the catalyst for making that happen. We certainly offer condolences to her family. And then as far as Christine's legacy, her daughter, right here in the front row, Laura, is now our grant manager for the coalition. We'll hear a lot more about Laura at the end of the meeting. We have a very special announcement to make at the end of the meeting. And the other person we want to recognize is Suzanne Callaghy Collins. Another person, if you walk, you know Suzanne. She passed away in the winter. And she came here as a child in the summer, as a summer resident over on Pequot, and basically never left. She raised her family here in the summers, and there are a bunch of them. I can't remember how many grandkids and great-grandkids there are. So the influence that Suzanne has made, her family decided to make Pocasset Water Quality Coalition their charity for remembering Suzanne. And we've been overwhelmed. We have donations from 14 states, and I'm not going to go into the exact money, but we thank Suzanne's family. I think her brother is here somewhere. Pete, are you here? Small family. Here we go. Thank you very much. One theme today for this is don't shoot the messenger. So, you all are supporting us. We're doing as much as we can to get as much information and share it. So, some of what you're going to hear, you're not going to like. Probably some of it anyway, let's say that. So when we go back to our first speaker at our first meeting was Z. Crocker from Barnstable Clean Water. And one of Z's first comments, if you remember, was, this is all our fault. So, we've been polluting the water. We didn't know it probably for a long time, but now it's time for us to fix it. So, it's going to be expensive, but it's a lot more expensive if we don't do it. So on that note, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our state senator, Susan Moran. And we thank Senator Moran. She has been at all of our meetings, and we love the fact that she comes, she gives us legitimacy, and she gives us great information.
Wow, this group does grow every year, and I can't tell you how absolutely crucial it is to have this sort of grassroots effort, putting a spotlight on a topic that all of us, all of you here on the wet grass have a direct interest in. And I'm so proud to be here with Andrew Gottlieb, a great friend, an absolute expert, and just a brilliant advocate, and MJ representing the select board. She's been focused on this really from day one. So great to see all of you. And you know, speaking of Andrew, I was reading the Globe this morning about 90% of our estuaries being polluted. 90%. That's something we can no longer ignore. And exactly what was just mentioned, it's a problem that we've been ignoring for too long, and now it's really expensive. So I just want to mention a couple things. Obviously, I'm the state senator from Plymouth Barnstable. I represent 8 towns. I live in Falmouth, and this is something that every town is grappling with. $15 million was allocated for towns in the last year's economic development bill for nitrogen reduction efforts in towns with nitrogen-sensitive estuaries. What that means is, with the Cape and Islands Selectmen's Association and others, we've been fighting as hard as we can for money and for more focus on Cape Cod, being one of the most challenging and one of the most damaged areas already. These funds are only going to cover a small portion of the cost. There's an estimate of about $30,000 for individual property owners to upgrade septic systems, and even higher costs for towns' new watershed management plans and sewer systems. So my focus has been, give me the money. I filed a bill this session to allocate an additional $175 million to the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund for targeted distribution for towns and individual septic systems. We're working with the regulations so that they still move forward in a way that we get credit for steps that we've already taken, and that moves the projects forward as quickly but as equitably as possible. I currently chair the Joint Committee on Revenue, which means everything having to do with money. I've fought hard to have a direct included tax package relief that's currently in conference. We've advocated for Title V tax credit from between $6,000 and $18,000. And this will mean real money in your pockets as you move forward with an incredibly expensive task. The Massachusetts Clean Water Trust has a long-standing relationship with Barnstable County. It provides funding for the Aquafund Community Center program. Right now, Dan Gessett in the county government has moved forward with some proposed, basically it would be a process where the county is contributing more and more into this fund. Long story short, this is going to be a battle every day. We know the MBTA is in trouble. We just got a little more money in the RTA fund for Cape Cod. We want to be sure that we are loud, we're data-driven, and that's what the money, including bequests, as we just mentioned, is really going to go for. Because we certainly can wait in line with the rest of the state, but the more that we focus on Pocasset and the more that we lift up the issues that we're dealing with right now, the faster that we will get more funding to really finally address the issue that we're all a part of. So I bring it back to the rest of the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, there's so much information that we have today. We're not going to talk about all of it. Behind me is a table with, I don't know, at least a dozen pieces of information. Some things we've created ourselves, some things our partners have given us to share. So please help yourself at the end of the meeting. Anything that, if we run out of things, we're going to get them all on the website this coming week. Speaking of that, our web manager is here today. Mike Karen, can you put your hand up? Thank you very much. Mike is behind the scenes doing a lot of our projects. So one of the big topics is the TMDL. So the TMDL is the study of the water that would determine how much of certain pollutants the water can absorb. So currently, the Buzzards Bay Coalition is working on the TMDL for Red Brick Harbor, Hen Cove, and Pocasset Harbor. So just yesterday, they gave me a schedule to say that the TMDL should be completed on at their phase by the middle to the end of 2025. Then the TMDL goes to the state to be approved. Then it goes to the EPA to be approved. So once that's approved and presented to the town, that's when the clock starts for us having to upgrade our systems. Right now, you don't have to do it. But if you do something now and you don't use IA systems, you're going to have to do it again. So, you know, the contact for all of this in the town is the Board of Health. So if you have questions, that's who to contact. If you have questions and they're not answering them, send an email to Pocasset Water Quality Coalition. We'll find the answers for you. So that's our most up-to-date information, which we just received yesterday. So there are really three problems. The Title V, the septic is the main problem. But we also have a problem with excess of fertilizer, pesticide fertilizer, not organic fertilizer. So stormwater runoff is the third issue, and that of course is partially a problem because fertilizer gets washed into the street, comes down all the hills, goes into Hen Cove. So we have something to talk about that later, but right now our group, Board of Directors, has created a couple of white papers, one on fertilizer and one on nitrogen. So right now we're going to introduce one of our board members, Patty Danilecki. She's going to give a little overview of the fertilizer white paper, which there are copies available on the table. Thanks, Patty.
Good morning. Board member Bill Vino and I have put together providing some basic information about the increasing presence of nitrogen and phosphorus in Hen Cove and nearby waterways. Nitrogen and phosphorus are both major contributors to the deterioration of our waterways. The increase can be attributed in part to nitrogen-based lawn and garden fertilizers used by homeowners and businesses. Our paper summarizes some basic guidelines that will help mitigate the unintended release of nitrogen and phosphorus into our water. First, residents need to make wise choices in the types of fertilizer products used, ensuring that the products used are best suited for their lawn and garden conditions. And second, ensure that the fertilizers used are properly applied following manufacturer's guidelines. Choosing appropriate amounts of products applied, together with a watering schedule, will reduce excess nitrogen and phosphorus.
Good job, Patty. Thank you. So, this is an example. I have borrowed these from some of my neighbors, and these are signs that get put on your lawn if you're ruining our water. I'm not being subtle here, because this is the true fact. Pesticides through stormwater runoff and through groundwater. One of the reasons the problems on Cape are so severe is because our ground is porous, and the water travels way faster here than it does on the other side of the bridge. So I didn't bring mine. We have one of these at our house, except it's white. And the white signs mean that you're using organic products. So, you know, if you remember last year, we had Sarah Molyneux, who has come and joined us again from Conservation Law. And she was with Heather Recovery. So when I finished a talk last year about fertilizer, I walked away. Heather whispered in my ear, "Why didn't you just tell them not to use any fertilizer?" Okay, I'll tell them now. So anyway, if you have these yellow signs in your yard, please stop. Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is probably one of the most knowledgeable and influential people on the Cape as far as our ecology and our water is concerned. Andrew Gottlieb is the director of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, and we all kind of bow down when we need information. That's where we go. So Andrew's going to share a bunch of his knowledge, and he's also brought 3 or 4 brochures that are available at the table in the back that help you to understand why we're here and how we get out of it. Andrew, thanks so much for coming.
I feel like I'm just set up to fail at this point. So, you know, we're time limited, so there's ways to do this where it's complicated and where it's simple. You're going to get the simple version. The simple version is a little bit more direct. And the details, you mentioned, left a bunch of reports. I'd really encourage you to take this one, the State of the Waters report, because you can see that Bourne's not special, not different. The things that are happening here in Bourne are happening in every water body on Cape Cod. So, as you mentioned, 90% of the estuaries that we monitor, of the 53 on the Cape, 90% have poor water quality that fails to meet state and federal standards. We started doing this report 5 years ago now. This 5th one will be out in a couple of months. 68% were failing to meet standards. So we've seen a rapid increase in the decline of water quality across the Cape to the point where you can't ignore it unless you just choose to ignore the realities of what's happening around. And there aren't that many estuaries left on Cape Cod that exhibit good water quality that remain to go bad. There's 5. Every single embayment facing west into Buzzards Bay except one fails to meet standards. Every single south-facing embayment on Cape Cod fails to meet standards. And now we're starting to lose water quality in the few stations on the Bayside, Cape Cod Bayside, that have remained high in water quality. And the answer is the same every single estuary: excess nutrients. The primary source of those excess nutrients is inadequately treated wastewater that we all contribute to the resource from the backyard systems that service our houses. That's the answer. Okay? That's the source of the problem. 85%, roughly 85% of the excess nitrogen that causes water quality decline comes from our septic systems. The remaining 15%, lawn fertilizers and stormwater. I'll take it a little further than what you heard. You don't need to fertilize on Cape Cod. What we need to do is have lawnscapes, much like the one you're on today. It's a rough, mixed blend of rough grasses, dandelions, moss, and clover. That was what wants to be here. If you want to continue to force plants that don't want to be here into our landscape, you're going to have to water them and you're going to have to fertilize them. And the cost of that, of your nice yard, is going to be poor water quality and excess algae in that payment. Nobody likes to hear it, but that's the reality. If you stop fertilizing and the town removes all the stormwater from the embayments, that will not solve the problem by itself. You will help make things less bad. You can't make them good until and unless there is a comprehensive, municipally scaled program to excess nitrogen. And the regulations that just passed provide a framework for that. And so there's two elements to it. One is the one that got a lot of play, which is I have to upgrade my septic system within a set period of time. There's some truth to that, and those regs are in force and are in place and do create potential for individual homeowners to have to upgrade their existing septic systems. And certainly the reality that new septic systems, new construction, renovation requires replacement of a system or failure, you're going to have to put in septic systems that treat nitrogen at a more aggressive level than a standard Title 5. For those of us that all own existing septic systems and live in areas that have already been designated as nitrogen sensitive, or like this one are going to be in the future, that obligation to upgrade your septic system applies only if your town chooses not to pursue something called a watershed permit. Watershed permits were created as part of this new rule package that passed, that was adopted in July. It's the part that doesn't get talked about quite so much, for a variety of reasons. Some motivations are good, some not so good. But the reality is, your town says to the state, we've got a 20-year program that looks at the overall watershed and has any combination of nitrogen management techniques that together reduce nitrogen to the level that the scientific study demonstrates is needed to bring that abatement back to health, then the requirement to upgrade existing systems goes away. The whole system is intended to motivate towns to create a schedule and an obligation, a legally enforceable obligation, to adopt the measures necessary to restore each one of the 53 embayments on Cape Cod that are either experiencing poor water quality because of excess nitrogen or are known to or so what the town of Bourne chooses to do will have an enormous impact on what you can and should be doing locally within your watershed. There's no watershed that I know of on Cape Cod that is degraded due to excess nitrogen that can be brought back to standards, and forget the standard, just functioning ecological health. It gives you the kind of embayment that brought you here in the first place. Clear water so you can see your feet when you're up to your waist in the water. You actually see your feet, and your feet are on hard sand, not 6 inches into the mud. There is no embayment that I'm aware of on the Cape that can be brought back to that condition without some level of municipal sewer. Okay? There's a lot of talk and a lot of people who believe firmly in the promise of alternative septic systems, and the new septic system, the generations of new septic systems provide reduced nitrogen into the environment. By themselves, as yet, there's no demonstrated, generally approved system that brings nitrogen low enough that by itself it can restore water quality. So we may find, based on technological advances in the future, that changes. But as we sit here today, thinking about what we're going to do as a community to fix this one and a whole bunch of others across the Cape, I think, and our position as an organization is that some collection and treatment is a part of the solution. It doesn't mean that every system or every septic system on the Cape needs to be replaced. In fact, that's actually not the case. But roughly speaking, about half probably do. And then the remaining half should be in these higher performing alternative systems, because in every instance, less nutrients you put into our water resources is better for the water resource. So as you interact as a group with your town officials, you know, it's our position that every town should be signaling to the state their intent to obtain one of these watershed permits. And as Senator Moran mentioned, there's a lot of money in the system right now that helps towns move forward with municipal scale programs. There's been a now 15-year series of legislative options that have been built with Cape Cod in mind to mitigate the impact of building these systems on the individual taxpayer. Senator Moran's been a key part of that process over the last several years. The truth of the matter is, it's less expensive on a per house basis to build a wastewater collection and treatment system on Cape Cod than it is anywhere else in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There are 351 towns, 336 of them would trade places with the 15 towns on Cape Cod if they had access to the tools that Cape Cod has to mitigate financing costs for construction. That money is not going to last forever. There's good reason to accelerate the plans that the towns have to take advantage of money that's currently available. Federal money, as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, is a 5-year infusion of $1.1 billion in water quality grants that cycle through the state revolving fund. That money's not going to be here forever. And it's smart now to get in line for that funding sooner than later. In addition, there's local money available. Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust Fund has provided well over $100 million to Cape towns in the form of direct property tax relief for construction of wastewater treatment facilities. Barnstable County, as you mentioned, has a low interest, 0 to 4% interest loan program, which looks even better today than it did a year and a half ago when the program was conceived, to help people with both the cost of upgrading septic systems and the cost of connecting their homes to sewer systems that might be coming down the road. So there's a lot of opportunity available. It doesn't mean it doesn't cost anything, but it costs less to do this now on Cape Cod than it ever has before. And there's been a lot of efforts in a number of towns to say, well, we don't know enough, so until we know everything, we can't do anything. Bad plan. Most of these programs happen in phases. And there's certain parts of each one of these watersheds where the level and intensity of nitrogen loading from homes is clearly going to have to be mitigated by central collection and treatment systems. And you can do the first 50% without knowing exactly what the last 10% is going to be. You don't have to know exactly which street you're going to do 18 years from now to do the streets that you know you need to do now. So now's the time for interested homeowners, people that are concerned about water quality, to band together and work with your communities. Because I think most towns, I know through Kathy, this is certainly true in Bourne, most towns know they need to move forward with this stuff. What they need is the support of individual groups and voters to show up at town meetings, at the design discussion meetings, at the debt exclusion ballot override questions that you're going to need, and say yes. Their obligation to you is to give you the chance to vote yes on something. Then it's your job to say yes. So support your town, engage with your town. The simple reality here is we know the cause of the disease. It's nutrient load. And fixing it's really not that complicated. It's a little bit expensive, and it certainly has impacts on individual homeowners. But so does doing nothing. Doing nothing is a decision. And so, when it comes to solving the nitrogen problem, we're not trying to cure cancer here. It's just not that hard. It's a little complicated when it comes to figuring out equitable ways to finance it, distribute those costs across the community, and there are tools out there to help you with that. But the basic solution, collecting wastewater, treating it to a modern level. We're not talking about doing anything that complicated or that innovative. It's basically stop digging a hole in the backyard and throwing your waste in it and assuming it's going to go away, and treating it to the level that a occurs in almost every other community on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Most areas that are developed to the density that we are reliant on some type of sewering and wastewater treatment. And those areas that are not are experiencing, like Long Island, are experiencing the same type of problems that we are. So there's nothing unique going on here, and there's nothing that hard that concerted effort by your town, supported by you as environmental voters, can't solve. So while water quality is currently bad, and it's probably going to get a little bit worse in the next few years, as all the nitrogen that we put into the system finds its way through, finds its way through the water bodies, it'll start getting better shortly after we stop the loading that we've engaged in throughout the last several decades. But it won't start getting better, and it won't stop getting worse until we change what we're doing. So a lot of big scale things that you have to wait some time period. The one thing you can do when you go home today is make a decision to change how you manage your property. Change your plantings, go to more native landscape, change your lawn, your view of your lawn. Not saying don't have a lawn, but change your view of your lawn and how you manage that property. Restore native plantings along the edge of the waterway to help reduce the nutrient load coming off. Plant plants that don't want nutrients, and then you can save money in your yard and time in your yard by just allowing plants that want to be here, that are acclimated to our environment, to be here and do their function. Stop trying to force fit a bunch of species into our environment that don't want to be here. There's some good materials on the table that we left, in addition to the ones that were produced by your organization. There's a ton of information on our website that would enable you to do that work, and it's not that hard, and you don't have to be a purist about it. If there's a particular flower you love, you keep your flower. But there's a lot we can do individually that collectively will end up making some modest difference in the water quality you're experiencing on this waterway that you care so much about.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That's fantastic. So Andrew's organization has created this little card that I have in my hand, and it's really it has a whole idea of how your lawn should be working. So there's some of these back here. We'll get it up on our website this week. So please try to look these up. Senator Moran has got a tight schedule, so she's leaving us, and we want to thank her for coming again. So I have some of her business cards. If anyone has interest in contacting her about anything she said or questions you have, come up and see me at the end of the meeting. So Andrew spoke about the cost and how it all can work. So I know a number of people have asked me about sewering versus IA. So conventional theory is that if we are going to have town sewer, municipal sewer, that the cost between building the treatment plant, digging up the roads, connecting to all the houses, that is about $100,000 per home that the town would have to fund by borrowing, and we would all have to pay in our taxes. And like Andrew said, that's the optimum solution, but it's not practical everywhere. So an IA system is, depending on how you do it, where you live, what your landscaping is, can be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000. So, obviously it's cheaper and it's way faster. If we decided to build sewer in Bourne right now, it's 10 years away. So you can call somebody and get your IA system put in by the end of this year, more than likely. So there are pros and cons for both, but like Andrew said, we're better to start doing something than wait for the perfect opportunity. So with that said, this little pamphlet, which they're up on the table, this is from the Cape Cod Aqua Fund. And this is sponsored by Barnstable County. This is what Andrew mentioned. There are loan programs based on your income from 0% to 4%. to cover the cost of what you would need to do. So I visited these people in Barnstable yesterday. They want you to call them. They want you to email them. If you go on the Barnstable County website, you can find the Aqua Fund very easily and get whatever information you need as far as contacting and how it works. So that's where we stand on that. So one of our other white papers is about nitrogen and why it's a problem and what we need to do to get rid of it. So the author of that is one of our board members, Chris Beatty, and he's going to give you a little summary. The actual full white paper is on the table behind us. Chris?
At the risk of being repetitive, I will try and keep this brief. The white paper is back there. The simple story is this. You've heard about where the nitrogen's coming from, the septic and the cesspools primarily, and a little bit of runoff from lawns and the streets. The nitrogen gets into the groundwater, runs into our bay. It promotes algae, right? The algae makes the water cloudy. Cloudy water starts to block aquatic life from proliferating, growing. Eelgrass starts to die off. Then the algae dies. It eats up the oxygen as it decomposes, further impeding aquatic life. Ends up on the bottom in that black muck that you don't like to walk on, would much rather work on the sand. And this process just continues. And very simply, that's what's going on with the nitrogen. In the fresh water, it's phosphorus, but in the waters we have in the salt water, it's the nitrogen. If you want to read more about it, there's a white paper there to explain it. And it was written before the DEP regulations came out in, I guess, June. So it says, pending the regulations. We will update that in the white paper when we get it online. But I'll keep it to that. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Well done. So a couple of other things. So leading up to the new regulations, the Department of Environmental Protection, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, held 4 listening sessions. 2 of them were virtual and 2 of them were in person. So representatives of our group attended all 4 of those sessions, and we spoke up in favor of the regulations. So when I say don't shoot the messenger, all of our research, all what we've learned, what we listen to says this has to be done. So like I said earlier, it's going to be expensive, but it's way more expensive if we don't do it, because this has been unchecked since the first Title V regulations were put in place in the 1990s. So, when we say don't shoot the messenger, we're the messenger. And we spoke about, we told the meetings that we went to that our thinking is that when the enforcement comes upon us, that it should be done gradually. Otherwise, it's going to be crazy costs because we're not installers. And we think it should be done starting with the water and moving back. So if your house, your property is within 500 feet, those should be done first. If the town takes a watershed permit, then either the first 3 to 5 years are those people. Then the next group would be 1,000 feet, then to 1,500, and so on until everybody has an updated system. So, we're very pro on the watershed permit. MJ, Select Board Chair, MJ Mastrangelo is going to speak in a few minutes about that. At the end of MJ's talk, we'll take some questions for Andrew or for MJ. Mary Jane, would you like to speak?
Morning, everyone. What a gorgeous day. Well, hear me? Holding it right? Okay. So I'm MJ Mastrangelo. I'm chair of the select board now. I think I was here before speaking as chair of the sewer commissioners. So I'm going to talk about the town of Bourne and what we're doing and how important the next year and a half is going to be for our comprehensive wastewater management plan. So we started our comprehensive wastewater management plan, and we did put it on hold while the Title V regulations were in flux because we didn't want to spend our $600,000 and find out that we had to start all over again. But what we've done so far is look at the different watersheds that we have. And in Bourne, we actually have only 2 watersheds that have TMDLs. So there are technically only 2 watersheds in the town of Bourne that are designated as impaired. The first one is Pocasset Squeegee, and the second one is Queens Harbor. So our plan has to talk about those 2 systems first. For Red Brook Harbor, Pocasset River, that watershed, the fact that Buzzards Bay Coalition is working on the TMDL is really important, because having a TMDL and being declared as an impaired waterway means that a lot to you as people, because if you want to upgrade your system, the town, if the watershed permit's going to tell you you have to do it, and that's what makes you eligible for that aqua fund money. If you're not an impaired system, if this system fails, you can go to the aqua fund and they'll help you replace it. But if your system isn't in failure, you're on your own if you're not an impaired waterway. I think Bourne is kind of interesting because we did early on storing in Buzzards Bay. But we're in a predicament because Buttermilk Bay, which we know is impaired, doesn't have a TMDL. Pocasset Harbor, we know has issues and it doesn't have a TMDL. So we've been pushing and working with the Buzzards Bay Coalition to get this done. So what are we doing now? We're working on a comprehensive wastewater management plan. We have a draft plan that says in all of our watersheds, if we were to do IA systems, we could control the nitrogen to be within the estimated TMDL. The only exception that right now is around Buttermilk Bay, and that's an area that we would have to sewer. Is that the right choice? Would it be better to sewer or do the IA systems? I think we're going to be able to analyze that in the next year. Because for me, I'm a numbers person. I want to look at the numbers. And in the draft report, which is actually available on the town website under Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, you have to scroll down a little bit, but there was a update that was done to the select board on July 25th. It's now available on the website. So in Pocasset Harbor, there's 1,450 septic systems that would need to be replaced. So 1,450 systems times $50,000 each system is $73 million. 1,450 systems, $50 million for those 1,450 people. So when they say that, and Andrew talked about this, sewering is expensive, but sometimes the cost per house is less expensive. So we as a town need to pay attention. This next year for all of you is going to determine the future of the town, the future of the water, and the solution that the town of Bourne is going to be going with. So you need to pay attention. When it comes to financing, Bourne's going to have to look at a number of things. So one of the things that they did in Mashpee and they did in Sandwich is that they took some of their CPA money that we pay for our open space, and they reduced that CPA assessment by 1%. And they started a new fund called the Wastewater Infrastructure Fund, and they made that a 2% assessment. So that created, just like CPA, a Wastewater Infrastructure Fund that would help pay $773 million. That's a discussion that the town of Bourne, that the select board has been having. We started to talk about it. It's going to require that we go to a town meeting and talk about it. But when you talk about this being, it's not just a problem for Pocasset Harbor. It's a problem for all of us. We all need to have the water quality problem on Cape Cod fixed in our community, and we all need to help take care of it. It's an environmental problem. It's just like when we did the wastewater treatment plan at Buzzards Bay. We said, yes, the sewer users are going to pay part of it, but the rest of us are going to pay part of it too, because we all share in the environment and we want it to be good for everyone. So as we look at the numbers, and I think it's important for us to put numbers to the solutions, we'll look at What's it gonna cost in Pocasset Harbor? What's it gonna cost in Mahan's? What's it gonna cost in Queens Harbor? What if we sewer it instead? Is there a sewer option that we could be doing? Are there places that we should be sewering? Take this area here, like around Circuit Ave in this area, you have very small lots, you're very densely populated. It's difficult to like fit septic systems on it. I think that especially the new, some of the new septic system, IA septic systems that are only in provisional status now have great promise. So we need to look at that, but we need to be sure as a community that what we're doing is going to solve the problem. I think it's really important. So right now we're looking at there'll probably be a public meeting this fall to talk about the options that are being considered. It's very important to participate in that. Based on the public input on that, we'll be finalizing our recommendation, which will go to PEP. Probably next fall, in the fall of 2024, we should be going to town meeting for approval of our comprehensive wastewater management plan. So pay attention. It's going to be important to all of you. Timing, I don't know about the timing. I mean, I think that getting the TMDL for this area is really important. Getting TMDLs for all of our areas is important. But when Buzzards Bay Coalition says that in June of 2025, they're going to be setting to DEP the report on the TMDL, well, you know what else is going to be happening in June of 2025? It's going to be the 2-year block of the new regulations, and DEP is going to be pretty busy. So what we do in the best solution is going to happen, and we're working hard on it, but we really need all of you to help pay attention and help us figure out the financing and how we're going to do it as a town. I do want to mention one thing that Wellfleet did. So Wellfleet is doing some sewering and they're doing some IA systems. But they actually went to the state and filed a $3 million state revolving fund request to install IA systems in their community for a section that they looked at. And that's another thing that we have to look at. We have to look at creative ways to finance so that we can get it done and we can get it done as quickly as possible. So that's what we're doing.
Good job. Thank you, MJ. So, like I said, the senator had to leave, but if anyone has questions for MJ or for Andrew, let us know right now. Let's take some questions. We'll have Tony?
So, one quick question. With respect to, back to the bumper.
Yeah, you could.
It's easier.
Come on, Pat.
Don't take my photo.
Take it out.
I'm facing this way. So just a curiosity question. If a home separated, let's say groundwater from septic, does that help in terms of nitrogen loading so that groundwater, let's say, the showers and so forth, was separated, and then what you put into your IA system is only septic? Does that help reduce the nitrogen from that perspective?
So about 85% of the nitrogen load from leaving your house is from urine. So there are systems out there that separate, there's gray water systems where you can have, basically water from the toilet go to one containment structure, treatment, and then the rest of the house goes somewhere else. Those kinds of systems will have an impact and a benefit. Your options right now for alternatives, you can do a composting toilet. Basically, it's a self-contained system. All the water from the toilet system goes into the composting bin, and that gets churned and creates, beneficial reused product. Those are out there. They work great. They require certain space elements in your house. They require someone who's willing to manage. Not that they're particularly hard to manage. There's incinerating toilets. Basically the same thing. There's talk of urine diversion toilets systems that basically take the urine off to a different location. You know, all these things are out there. The willingness of society to adopt different practices and inconvenience yourself just a little bit is necessary for some of these alternative approaches to work. And the truth of the matter is the data's not great on it. You know, there was an attempt in Falmouth to do a urine diverting toilet pilot several years ago. The town provided a $5,000 subsidy to homeowners who were willing to adopt it. They got one. There aren't a lot of composting toilets out there. There are a few. But generally, and this doesn't speak all that well to my own view of human nature, I guess, people haven't shown themselves willing to go out of their way to change how they manage their yards, let alone how they manage the stuff going down the toilet. So, for better or for worse, these systems that are where the technology takes care of the problem, doesn't rely on human behavior, are more certain, they're more definable, and from a regulator's point of view, they're more reliable in terms of understanding whether or not you're going to get the reductions you want from a given technology. I'll close with one example. So, you know, the proponents of urine diverting toilets, you could have somebody, you might be willing to do it. So you've got a standard toilet, an alternative toilet, or a urinal. You're 100% compliant. All the nitrogen from your house goes somewhere else. No impact on the water resource. The next person who buys your house, do they have the same ethic? Do they have the same willingness to convenience themselves? And if not, then it all goes down the standard toilet into the septic system. What does that mean in terms of the environment? So how you manage the human element to this is a really tricky part of the discussion. And there's a real resistance to people, don't tell me what to do in my house. The whole property rights thing. So, you know, if you have the town all of a sudden turning around and telling people, you know, all the men, you need to pee over there, and everybody else pees over there, that's not going to work very well. So it's a tough position to put your town in, and I think something that we have to take into consideration. How realistic and how durable are the investments that you make? They're reliant on people's behavior before you pick an alternative approach.
Topic. Jan and I are walking around. A very common comment that I hear is, this is just another unfunded state mandate. Well, if you have grandchildren or if you have children, then if we don't do something, then they're not going to have all the fun that we have in our water because it won't be around. Yesterday's Enterprise had an article about eelgrass. So if you're not getting the Enterprise, or if you can subscribe to it without even getting the paper, you can just do it online. The Enterprise in the last 2 months has done some really interesting articles about other ways that we can just contribute to making it better. Not big whatever, just small things, daily things. Sarah Molyneux is here today. Thank you, Sarah, for coming. She is the chair of the board of Conservation Law Foundation. She was our speaker last year. Sarah invited us to her house for a tour. Sarah has composting toilets, and it was like, we were like, oh, and then we were like, holy cow, this is great. But there are restrictions depending on the layout of your home, but it is something, you know, to look at if you're such a committed person that you wanna try to do that. Any other questions for Andrew or MJ?
I have a question for Andrew. Does emptying your septic more frequently or anything?
So it's recommended that you pump your septic system every 3 years. That won't do much to reduce the nutrient loading. What it will do is extend the functionality of your system. Because basically it keeps the tank from filling up, having the solids that are supposed to settle down the bottom, stay down the bottom instead of filtering out into your leach field, which can cause your system to back up. The implications of that are either septic roll back up into your low point for plumbing in your house, or you get breakout on the surface and you can get exposed to pathogens which are bad for your health. But in terms of a nutrient production technique, it doesn't do much because the tank just fills up again and begins to load it out. So modest, but not a lot.
Thank you. Next question.
What are the regulations now for getting a home sold? What do they have to do with the septic?
So one of the things that the select board's doing is having a joint meeting with the Board of Health to make sure, I think now with the new regulations, do they have to upgrade to a new system?
Yes.
So in the past, it was just upgrading to Title V. but I
January
think
1.
the new system's gonna require that they be compliant with the new regulations
As of January 1st.
as of January 1st.
This coming January, yes. Right, this coming January 1st.
I just want to know what the town is doing about watershed. Are they doing anything about that?
Thank you, Alice. Great question.
So the question is whether we're doing anything about the watershed permit. So the watershed permit is pretty dependent on having a comprehensive wastewater management plan. The way they have set up the watershed permits, and I've read the regulations the way it is, there's certain information that you have to have. Most of that's going to come from your comprehensive wastewater management plan. The decision of the town whether to go with the wastewater with a watershed permit or not is, if the town goes with a watershed permit, then the obligation rests with the town to get things done. And so therefore it becomes a town obligation. If we do not go for a watershed permit, then it's going to fall all on the homeowners, individual homeowners who are in the watersheds that have a TMDL and have been declared impaired. So I think it's going to be up to the town and the town meeting to vote as part of our comprehensive wastewater management plan, whether or not we're going to go for a watershed permit. This is why it's important to stay involved.
So on that note, before I get to the next question, we are pretty certain that if you're not a year-round resident here, you don't vote here, but we are going to need votes. So I don't know if you realize that if you're a married couple or any kind of a couple, one of you can vote in one town, the other one can vote in another town. So if you're part-time residents, one of you is registered to vote in Bourne, then we would hopefully get your vote when all these subjects come up. It's very important. So another watershed permit side of the article of the story would be that if the town doesn't get a watershed permit, well, let's just start from the other way. The town gets a watershed permit. The town has 20 years to make the changes that need to be made to fix the water. If there's no watershed permit, then the state rules apply. We have 5 years to do it. So just do the math on supply and demand. We all have to do it in 5 years. We're going to be paying through the nose, or maybe even through something else. So we need votes. When this comes to a vote, as MJ said, we need people here to vote yes on if we need to have an override, whatever it is to fix the water, we need people here to vote. So that's the other side of the watershed permit argument, which we support 100%.
A question, most septic systems have leaching fields. I'm wondering, planting of trees help absorb nitrogen out of the soil? Because I notice these raised beds that people have their system and they don't plant anything on them.
So you can have plantings over your leach field, but you don't want anything with deep roots. So, ornamental plants and the like are fine over the leach field, but you don't want to have trees on top of the leach field. The roots will get in. Smart, they go to the water and they go to food. They'll find their way up into your leach structure and you'll be gone roto-rooter.
But it absorbs the nitrate.
I mean, yes, the plant, and that's why you want to have, buffers. But part of the problem with septic systems is they're designed to introduce nutrients down low into the soil structure. So, there's the release of those nutrients in that water is several feet below the ground surface. You need big trees in order to get it. So you're not going to get a ton of pickup from plants of septics. I want to leave you with one note because we talked a lot about money, and I can talk make your ears bleed about the details of the finance plans, but I want to give you 3 examples that should make you feel a little better about where this could all go. Town of Orleans, first phase of their wastewater program, $66 million. Town of Mashpee, first phase of their wastewater program. So both those projects were treatment plant and initial sewering. Mashpee, $54 million. Yarmouth, this spring, $207 million. The amount of money added to the annual property tax rate to finance those 3 projects of in excess of over $300 million, $0. Didn't add a penny to the tax rate of those 3 towns because they utilize principal forgiveness and loans. They got 0 interest loans. They set aside their water, their short-term rental tax receipts, put it into funds that are going to pay off wastewater. They set up these water infrastructure funds. They created residential tax exemptions to mitigate the impact. So in all 3 of those towns, the votes for those wastewater projects, which were, I think it's safe to say, the single largest capital infrastructure projects ever initiated in each one of those 3 towns, I believe they were unanimous. And nobody votes unanimously for anything anymore. But when you can tell people that mitigated the cost off the tax rate, people want clean water, and it was not going to cost them any extra.
Awesome. Andrew, that's the best piece of information we've had all day. So we're coming to the end. If anyone has questions.